Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Vivian, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my August wrap up. I need to address a little bit of the situation at hand. I've been pushing off filming this wrap up mainly because of my face. As you guys can tell, I'm probably not wearing makeup. I'm wearing a little bit just because I feel like it's not possible for me not to wear a little bit. I've been getting my acne treated. I've been going to facials. They're very invasive procedures. I have open wounds on my face. I'm not actually allowed to wear makeup. I'm not allowed to cover everything. I've tried to cover a little bit. I know you guys can still see a little bit of scarring. I hope you guys can ignore that. That is my very long-winded intro. I hope you guys can look past it. I still need to film. I still need to get this uploaded. So we're gonna be doing my August wrap up. I read a total of 15 books. I'm gonna put all the stats on the screen right now because I have yet to calculate them, but it's a total of 15 books and I did DNF one book and we're gonna talk all about them. And we're just gonna go in order of the book I read first. I have my trustworthy reading journal in here with me because I actually forgot a lot of the books I read in the month of August. I don't know why. The month felt like it flew really fast, but at the same time, I completely forgot a lot of the books I read. I'm also very surprised at myself for being able to read 15 books just because I did go overseas for a little bit this month. The first book I read this month is actually a Kindle book. I read A Deal with the Bossy Devil by cleopatra. This was actually a very random find. I wasn't expecting to read this. I just went on Amazon to search for books and I came across this book. The premise looked interesting. Reviews were pretty good on Goodreads, so I decided to pick it up on KU. I ended up really enjoying this book. I rated this book 4 stars. In this book, you're following our FMC Ria, and she's an employee of this company, and the boss of this company is called Adrian, who is our FMC. A situation happened with Ria assaulting Adrian because of a mishap, and that video of Ria assaulting Adrian ended up going viral. And with that situation, Ria ended up owing Adrian, and Adrian decided to use that debt to ask Ria to fake date him or his family because his family has been pestering him to date, to get married. I really like this book. I think that the enemies to lovers in this romance book really felt like enemies to lovers. Sometimes I feel like with a lot of books, dislike to lovers, and I could really feel the hatred between the two of them in the beginning. The reason why this book is not higher than a 4 stars is just because of the third act conflict that I honestly really didn't like. I saw it from a mile away, and when it happened, I just felt like it was very anticlimactic in a sense. But other than that, I really liked everything else. I loved the banter. I loved the comedic elements of this book. I loved Ria's relationship with Jamie, who is her best friend. And overall, this book was really good. It surprised me a lot, so this was 4 stars. I read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. You guys can see my reading vlog of reading classics for a week. I ended up rating Little Women 3.5 stars. I know some of you guys are probably surprised by the rating because I know this book is well loved. I know a lot of people really liked it. I felt like in the beginning, yes, this was great. I loved getting to know all the characters. I loved that the 4 sisters of this book were all very distinctive. They were all very different, and their stories are also just unique to them. But as we went on with the plot and the storyline, it felt very redundant, and there were a lot of parts of this book where I actually felt like there were just too much information, and it was just really tiring to read it. At that moment, I think I wasn't really looking for that kind of book, so this ended up being a 3.5 stars. The ending was satisfactory, but I think it wasn't what I expected. 3.5 stars for Little Women. I went on to read the second book of the Bad Billionaire Bosses series. I'm so sorry, I don't know what the name of it, but it's the second book following A Deal with the Bossy Devil, and it's called A Failure to Match by cleopatra. And this book follows Jamie, who is the best friend of Ria from the first book. She is working in this matchmaking company. She has a client called Jackson Sinclair, and he is the hardest client by far that Jamie is currently working with. It's been 8 months and Jackson has yet to find his perfect match. All in all, it's because Jackson actually doesn't want to be matchmaked. He's actually being blackmailed by his aunt to go on this matchmaking thing to actually find a wife. Because of a situation that happened, Jamie ends up having to live with Jackson to figure out how to find him his perfect match. Obviously, Jamie ends up being his perfect match, but this book I rated 4.25. I love this book a lot more than the first book because I felt like Jamie and Jackson's like hatred was even hotter and tenser and spicier than the first book. I did feel like it felt a little bit repetitive in a sense where they're both enemies to lovers and they're from the same series, like romance series. I loved Jackson a lot more than Adrian as a MMC. Jackson had a lot of backstory in him, he had a lot of depth in him, and I think the author did such a good job with getting his story out in the open without really making it too heavy on the reader, because actually the things that happened to him was just really heavy for me. So yeah, I did really like this book. I overall really enjoyed both characters, loved the romance. I just felt like it wasn't a 4.5 read, so this ended up being a 4.25. Next up, I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So with this book, you're following Linus Baker, who is working in the department in charge of magical youth, aka Dickomy. He's a regular caseworker, but he ends up one day getting called by upper management, and he is sent to work in this orphanage that houses 6 very dangerous kids with dangerous magical powers. And in this orphanage, there's a caretaker called Arnold Parnassus. I got the name wrong again. Arthur Parnassus. And he's also an enigma. You don't really know what he is, you don't really know who he is. You just get to see the relationship Linus makes with these kids and how he goes through this whole situation with him and the place that he works, as well as his growing love for this orphanage. This book did start off really slow, and at first I really didn't like it because I felt like it was just too much Linus Baker. But then as you get on with the book, you get to know all of the 6 kids. You get to know Arthur. Is his name Arthur? Yeah, Arthur. And the relationship he will have with Linus at the end of this, and I think that is just very beautiful. It made me cry. I have a reading vlog on this, you guys can go check that out. There were a lot of morals in this book that I absolutely enjoyed. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there are a little bit of dog earring done on this book because I didn't have tabs on hand, but I felt like a lot of the quotes in here were just really beautiful. I really like this book. 4.5-star read. I enjoyed it so much. Next up, I read Some Kind of Perfect by Kristen Becker Ritchie. This is the last book in the Addicted series, and I am finally done with this whole series. This is the epilogue novel, so technically nothing really happened in this book. I did really like reading all of the characters in this book, but I felt like it was too long of an epilogue novel, so this is a 4-star read. I still really like the characters. I still got emotional reading this, and I still feel like I know them to death. It's like 700 pages. It's a thick chonker of a book. So yeah, 4 stars for Some Kind of Perfect. Next up, I read is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and this is a standalone fantasy. In this book, you're following Lucia, who is working in this rich, quote-unquote rich, because they're technically not very rich, household, and she has magic. There's not a lot of people who have magic in this world. She's one of those rare ones who have magic, and the owner of this household, I forgot what her name is, she ends up figuring out that Lucia has powers and wants to use her to go up the social ladder of this society. This book is actually set during the Spanish Inquisition, and it's really fun to read a historical fiction book with a little bit of magic involved, and I think overall the setting was done really well. I don't actually really know that part of history very well, so reading about it in this book is just very interesting. It's during a point in history where Jews and Muslims were being executed and Catholicism was just reigning throughout the society. The setting and the world was done really well. What I think lacked was that the characters were very flat. Didn't feel like they had depth, even though they were very interesting characters. I love reading about Santa Angel. Don't know how to say his name. It's a very weird name. He's the MMC of this book, by the way, and I feel like he is such an interesting character. You could have made him so complex, but there wasn't enough complexity with the characters. So this was a 3-star read. It just wasn't there. Like, I couldn't find the depth that I wanted in these books. I wanted something and I couldn't get it out of this book. In that same reading vlog, I read Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellers. I rated this book 1.5 stars. I hated this book. You're following Cleo, who is a 24-year-old, just recently graduated. Her visa's running out and she is broke, and she meets Frank in this New Year's Eve party. They end up getting into a marriage because of Cleo's green card, but also because Frank actually fell in love with Cleo and her artistic self and everything else. It's a very toxic relationship type of book. You're just following characters, you're following lots of POVs. With a lot of toxic relationship books or like character study books, I think what makes a story are the characters, and so I want to like the characters regardless of them getting into problems, being flawed, making mistakes. I think you can make it in a way where the characters it makes sense for them to act a certain way. It makes sense for them to make these mistakes, and you still can like these characters because they feel real. They feel like they're a part of you, or they feel like they're someone you know. I couldn't feel that with this book. Cleo and Frank irritated me to the bones. I didn't like the way they acted. I think they were very childish. Frank is a 40-year-old man and he acts even younger than Cleo does, and I think a lot of the things that happened in this book was not necessary. There were some POVs I didn't think was needed. There were a lot of drug and alcohol abuse that I felt like was just overly used. It's only 1.5 because I think the writing is great, and I think I want to pick up more Coco Meller's books. In that same reading vlog, I also read This Woven Kingdom by Tara Maffei. You guys, this is such a good book. This is the first book of a YA fantasy series. You're following Eliza. I've seen a few people pronounce her name differently. I call her Eliza. So you're following Eliza. She is the long lost princess of the Jinn Kingdom, and there are two different kingdoms. There's the Jinn, there's the Clay. The Jinn Kingdom are magical people. The Clay Kingdom are just basic human mortals. Lisa is in hiding in the Clay Kingdom, and she's working as a maidservant in another rich household. Feels like the same plot as The Familiar. And Cameron is the crown prince of the Ardunian Empire in this Clay Kingdom. One day they end up meeting, and Cameron realizes who she is, and you go on this cat and mouse thing, and you also get to know a lot more about different characters and all of that. This book is in dual POV. You get both Cameron and Eliza's POV. The setting and the world building and the magic system was done really well. It flowed so well. It was very flowery, and I think the reading experience was really good. What really bumped the rating down of this book, which I rated 3.75 stars, was the romance. It went on too fast. It was literally love at first sight, insta love. I don't like that. It ended up being very cheesy by the end of it. I didn't like it. So it ended up being a 3.75. I wanted to rate this like a 4 stars, but I just felt like it wasn't for material. Also felt like the pacing was a little bit all over the place, in a sense where some parts go on really quickly and then some parts nothing really happens. I have read the other 2 books of the series. It's the next book. I didn't realize that. This is the second book of the Woven Kingdom series, and in this book you're actually following a different male main character. From the end of the first book, you're introduced to a new guy, and his name is Cyrus, and in this book you don't have his POV, but he plays a big role in Eliza's POV. You're also following Cameron's POV in this book, but I have a feeling that Cyrus is going to be the main guy, so Cyrus is my MMC. Cameron is just a side character now. I felt like in this book, Eliza and Cyrus's romance flowed so well. It wasn't insta love, more like enemies to lovers, and I loved seeing that. Nothing really happened with this book. It's really no plot, just vibes, but what made me really like this book was the romance and getting to know Cyrus as a character. You don't know what he is, you don't really know why he's acting a certain way. It's so freaking good. I love the romance in this book. I read a few romance books. So the first book I read is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This is in a 24-hour readathon reading vlog that I think is up already. This one I rated 2 stars. So in this book you're following Delphi, who is our FMC, and she passed away due to a freak accident, and when she's up there she ends up getting a deal from the therapist there. I don't know what she's called. She's given a second chance in life, but in order to actually live again she needs to find her soulmate in 10 days. And the reason why I didn't really enjoy this book was that it was a lot of silly comedic things happening that I just felt was very cringy and very awkward. The main character Delphi was very outlandish in her actions, but the main reason why I didn't really like this book was that there is actually a different MMC than the soulmate she's supposed to find. The relationship the MMC Cooper has with Delphi, I also couldn't really see how they would end up liking each other, and it was just really quick, and I don't know why it happened that way. I just didn't like it. This is a 2 stars because I did end up liking the ending of this book, but other than that, I didn't like this book. I read Love at First book by Jen McKinley next. In this book you're following Emily, and she is moving to this Irish small town to help her favorite author write her last book, and she meets the author's son. They end up getting into a relationship, but this book is just so much more than that. What I really enjoyed about this book was the relationship Siobhan has with Emily. Siobhan is the author that she's assisting, by the way, as well as the relationship Siobhan has with her son, and I love seeing the dynamics of that and how Emily really treats Siobhan as her mom, because her real mom is a total bitch. I also really like seeing Emily's relationship with her son, who is called, I don't remember, Kieran. Kieran is a very grumpy bookshop owner. He's grumpy because he has a lot on his plate, so I don't think he's the type of grumpy that is bad. I don't really like grumpy main characters, by the way. Even though a lot of heavy things happened in this book, a lot of the topics didn't end up making me emotional, and I couldn't really feel with the characters. I felt like a third person. I know I am a third person. This is fake. I'm completely aware of that, but I feel like I need to be indulged into the story in order for me to actually feel with the characters, but this didn't really give me that. Next book I've read is Fate of the Sun King by enjoyyy, which is the third book of the Artifacts of Arano's series, and I've read the first two books in reading vlog. I'll try and find them and link in the description box down below. I love the cover of this book. It's so good. And in this whole series, you're following Lore, who is our FMC, and she has been living in prison all her life. One day something happens and she ends up getting picked up and sent over to the Sun King territory. She was in the Aurora King's territory, by the way, and she joins the trials of the Sun Queen, where the Sun King picks the winner to become his wife. And Lore doesn't really know why she was picked. Lore doesn't know how she even got to the Sun King territory. There's a whole backstory of that. You also follow our FMC Nadir, who is actually the Aurora King's son, and you get to see how he figures out who Lore is. I didn't like the first two books, and this book I did like a lot more than the first two books. It was significantly better in terms of the characters' decisions and their characteristics. I think Lore improved. She's not very naive anymore. She doesn't let people step on her, and she makes her own independent decisions. But I think that it still needs lots of improvement in terms of the writing and the plotting. It's a lot of weird pacing. It's a lot of cringy moments between Nadir and Lore. I did like Nadir as a character. I actually like Nadir more than Lore. The first two books I already liked him more than Lore, so reading about him in here, I did like him, but I think that it just lacked, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like the characters lacked, the plot lacked, the writing lacked, so this ended up being a 2.5 stars because it was mediocre. But I do admit I like the storyline and I want to know what's going to happen by the end of the series, because I think there's one more book. If I'm not wrong, there's one more book or maybe two more books. I read Lovelight Farms by BK Borison next, and I rated this 4 stars. So I actually read this book 2-3 years back, but I never noted it down or anything. And when I picked this up again, this book was very familiar to me, and I realized I actually read it before, back when it was still in KU and not picked up by a traditional publisher. So in this book, our FMC is Stella, and you're following her life as she tries to save her Christmas market called Lovelight Farms. There's a lot of bad things happening to her market, and she ends up joining this influencers competition where the social media influencer is going to come to her Christmas market and basically give her free marketing. However, in that application, she said that she opened the market with her boyfriend, which she doesn't have a boyfriend. So she ends up asking Luca, who is her best friend, to fake date her so that she can show the social media influencer she's not lying about the application. In comes Luca, our MMC, who has been in love with Stella all his life. I'm so sorry, not all his life. For the 10 years they were friends, he has been in love with her, and he ends up taking this fake dating situation in good hands because he wants to show her that they're good for each other. I really like this book because I love the relationship Luca and Stella has, and I think the way they got together was paced really well. I love the writing in this. The writing was really good. It was just done so well. It cannot be any higher than a 4 because I felt like it was a little bit outlandish that they knew each other for 10 years, but they never talked about their feelings for each other. I can understand in Stella's perspective why she doesn't want to talk about her feelings with Luca, but I don't understand why Luca just kept quiet about his feelings. But overall, I did like the storyline. I did find Stella's character by the end of it a little bit annoying, but she saved herself, so that's okay. I really liked it, so I enjoyed it so much. And then I read Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. This is in the same reading blog, the 24-hour readathon, by the way. And I didn't actually talk about my feelings about this book in that readathon. I read it and I just said I read it, but I didn't say anything about it. Basically, this book, you're following an accidental pregnancy trope. It's the whole point of the story. The FMC gets pregnant and she ends up having to go through the pregnancy with the help of the baby daddy, who she's actually not in love with, as well as falling for her best friend's brother. And by the way, her best friend's brother is the one that really stepped up to help her in this pregnancy. This is about her pregnancy and her relationship with herself, as well as her relationship with other people around her. And I think it's really beautiful and it's really sweet. It really did portray a lot of the pregnancy situation very well. I love the dynamic between her and the baby daddy, as well as the best friend's brother, their relationship with each other, as well as her relationship with her best friend. Everything, the whole web of relationship in this book was done really well, and I really like how it ended overall. It was a little bit a tad boring in a sense where it's just about her being pregnant, and I can understand it's a very long process of bringing a baby to life, but it was just about the pregnancy, and I think that's why this is a 4 stars. I love the book and I think the writing is great, and I love that she made such a beautiful book out of an accidental pregnancy. This is a 4-star read as well, and yeah, I really like her writing. I'm gonna pick up more of her books. If you guys like Out on a Limb, I think you'll really like this book because it's like the same type where they accidentally got pregnant, but this one is even funnier because she's not actually with the baby daddy, so I really like it. Last book I read in the month of August is In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. It's the same world as Lovelight Farms. In this book, you're following Beckett and Evelyn. Beckett is one of the partners of Lovelight Farms, and Evelyn is the social media influencer, the one who came in to help market Lovelight Farms. I was so excited for this book because I actually really liked seeing the little bit of snippets of Beckett and Evelyn, and in this book, they actually had a one-night stand before, and then Evelyn left and they never met again, and a few months later, because of Lovelight Farms, they end up meeting. Nothing really happened there, and she leaves again. In the next few months, Evelyn was just trying to find her way in the situation of her being an influencer, and she really needs to take a break. So she ends up going back to where she was happiest, and it was Lovelight Farms, and she ends up meeting Beckett again, and they get into a relationship again, and it was so much fun. I had such a great time reading this book, but then the third act conflict hit. It was the most horrifying part of this book. There was so much miscommunication. It didn't make sense to me why they would act that way because the both of them don't really have much trauma when it comes to their relationship with their parents or with their siblings or anything. They were totally fine. So I couldn't really justify their actions of why they never talked it out, of why there was literally no communication whatsoever. I couldn't grasp my head around it. I don't know why they had to break up. It was so weird. Not talking, not saying anything. There are these things called phones and they never use it. It ended up being a 3 stars because of that. I didn't like the conflict. I hated it. It was so bad. But I really did like their romance, and I love how they got together. It was so cute. And the book I DNF'd is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I stopped at page 55. I still have my bookmark inside. I don't know if I'm gonna pick it up anytime soon, but this is the DNF. Friends, that is it for this wrap up. My camera is overheating, so I'm just gonna go and bounce, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. I'm so sorry about this being uploaded late because I just don't know when to film it because of my face. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you guys enjoyed. If you guys have read any of these books, let me know. Let's talk about it in the comments section. And that is going to be it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!